Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
We're a week into 2020, and the real question is, have all of you already blown up your life? Did it only take 1 week to sabotage everything?
That's hysterical.
You've given up on your New Year's resolution.
Who even remembers what it was 2 days ago?
Yeah. You're done with it. You're done with it. It's over. It's so beyond you. One of my favorite Office episodes is when they do the New Year's resolution thing.
Oh, yes.
And Michael crams broccoli into Kevin's face.
You will
Just
eat
eat
this
it.
broccoli.
Just
you
eat
need
it.
to do your resolutions because nobody follow through. He's mad because the
Such a
girl
meltdown.
that he wanted to be with didn't follow through on her resolution.
Yeah.
Yeah. Guess what?
I have a New Year's resolution.
It's 2020. That's what I was going to say.
It is 2020.
What's your resolution? To not cut yourself when you shave anymore?
I cut myself when I shaved. I've had multiple people go, how did you get that cut on your face? Because it's on the high cheekbone. And I was like, when I was shaving, and everyone said the same thing.
It's like, it looks like you cut your eye, not
They're
your
like, why
face.
were you shaving so high?
Totally. Why were you?
I've got hair way up there.
Eye hair?
Yeah. No, it wasn't that. You just like kind of just smash against the cheek. I had shaving cream everywhere.
Oh, that makes sense, actually.
Mm-hmm. I look like Santa with a high beard, and I was just going after it. So
great idea.
anyways, so I actually don't have a resolution in 2020.
Nope.
I'm just going to squeak by one more year.
Do you know what my resolution is? To
What?
have no resolutions.
I think that's a great resolution.
No, but I'm kind of serious. Like I was scrolling, over the New Year's, and all these people had these resolutions.
They
Here are
always
the
say,
5
New
things
Year,
I'm gonna
New
do.
You.
New Year, new you.
I don't think anything major is going to change about me in the next few weeks. And
Well,
I'm not an entirely new person from last year.
Right.
Though I overcame a lot.
You did.
And I liked who I was. I don't need to get rid of old Justin. I like old Justin.
I know. It's so true. And I felt this pressure every time I'd read people's resolutions. Like, oh my gosh, yeah, I should change 5 things about my life too. And oh my gosh, yeah, I need to do this and this and this. And it felt so
Anxiety
overwhelming.
driven.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exhausting. And so pretty much now I am like, we live a lifestyle of transformation.
Yeah.
Like we have core values so that we're always loving ourselves and always growing.
So it's a perpetual growth. Yeah.
So I don't think I need to add resolutions. I'm like, no, I'm just going to keep doing how we do life.
Participate in healthy things in life that will keep inspiring me and drawing out the freedom inside of me.
Yeah. And I'm going to be different at the end of this year, just like I was different now from the beginning of last year.
Yeah. But I think part of what the podcast is we're called The Connected Life.
We are.
Yeah, we are. And part of this year, instead of having a resolution that's like, I need to change these specific things, how about just start with, I want to get more connected.
Yeah.
I want to figure out how to be connected to myself.
Yeah.
Connected to people. Connect to the world around me.
Yes. I was like, wait, I know that we're repeating our mantra, but I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, I don't either.
Yes.
But the whole thing is like, what if the resolution was pretty simple? I just want to learn how to be connected. And from that births all kinds of things.
Yeah. I mean, normally when we just pick like one thing and grow that and nurture that one thing, it affects multiple areas of our lives.
Totally. And so we're going to start this year off with a little special something called Getting Connected in the New Year.
Ooh.
How are we going to spend 2020 getting connected? What are things that keep us from connection? And what are ways to build more connection inside of life?
I like that.
And so if we can kind of begin with that foundation, that's going to be beautiful. Even for what we do with the Connected Life podcast here, it's going to like lead the way in what 2020 is going to be as we journey this out with all you listeners.
Yeah. So let's start with, there's a couple things that block connection. I mean, there's probably like lists and lists and lists, but we're just going to give a few.
A few that stand out to us.
And
major
then we're going
barriers.
to talk about a couple things to do just to intentionally engage connection.
Yeah. So major connection barriers. Unforgiveness.
Yeah. And some of this, I love that you brought up unforgiveness. Some of what we're talking about is kind of how to like clean your slate a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing because we can be carrying so much, almost like a giant bag. Like, what would I call it? I don't know. A duffel bag.
Yeah.
That doesn't have wheels and it's on my shoulder weighing me down and my back's in so much pain. Mm-hmm. And that's one of them. Yeah.
Unforgiveness. And here's the truth. If you live on the planet, you're going to be hurt by people. They're going to do stupid things to you.
Yeah.
You're going to have betrayals. You're going to have pain. You're going to have loss, and unforgiveness keeps you reliving that pain and that cycle over and over and over again.
Yeah. And what it does ultimately is unforgiveness starts building deep wells of bitterness, anger, and resentment.
Yeah.
And so that's a part of it. So the unprocessed anger, bitterness, and resentment, I think goes hand in hand with unforgiveness.
Yeah. And what that does is then it protects you from connecting with other people.
Yeah, because all of a sudden now relationships start falling apart, whether it's your marriage, whether it's relationship with kids, somebody that you're dating, friendships. It shuts down your ability to be vulnerable. It shuts down your ability to have fun and play.
Yeah, you put your walls up. You decide to like keep and you start making judgments of like, oh, well, this man hurt me. All men will hurt me. And then you are less connected to masculinity. And, oh, well, this friend hurt me. I can't trust any friends.
Yeah.
And that we often do that. We kind of, when pain happens, we decide that the way to never feel the pain again is to never get connected again.
Yeah, I just won't let anyone close to me. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of why we're talking to the barriers, about the barriers to connection, because if you're unaware of what's driving you,
yeah,
you're just going to be living this life where you feel very isolated and alone and sad and hopeless. And by the end of this list, you're going to want to turn this podcast off. My life sucks.
Right. Well, which is why we're giving them hope and how to
we're going to give you a ton of hope on the other side of this, but unknowingly, you can cultivate a lot. Yeah, you can carry a lot of it, and you're feeling totally hopeless. Some of you are going into 2020 feeling hopeless about it.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how to connect to yourself and you don't know how to connect to others because you have these barriers hiding in the background.
Yeah. So the beginning starts with, and I think forgiveness is such we'll probably do episodes on lots of the things we covered today in this year, because forgiveness deserves its whole own 5-hour long podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because there's so much to it. But forgiveness doesn't mean that what people did to you was okay.
Yeah.
Forgiveness doesn't mean that you never have pain from it again. I think this is a common misconception. Like, I can forgive somebody and then have a different wave of pain come up about that situation.
Yeah.
And then I normally need to forgive them again. And then I can feel good. And then another wave of it. So forgiveness doesn't mean you're done. Because lots of people are like, I forgave them. I'm never thinking about that situation again.
No.
Like, no, there's nuances. There's different beliefs that could come up. There's different triggers from a situation. So forgiveness is really, part of forgiveness for me is the ability to have empathy.
Right.
And the ability to disconnect that it was really about me.
Yeah. You mean the idea that someone's destructive decision-making is really about the pain inside of their soul and their soul cycles. And you happen to be a bystander that got hit by that destructive pain inside of them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's really not an attack on your character or your value. It's just like, that's where they're at.
Yeah. The idea that like, and I've hurt people. And normally when I hurt people, my intention is really good. And it's about the pain I'm in or going through or my protectors or my coping mechanisms. And so in lots of forgiveness, it's detaching my worth from someone else's behavior, which is so hard for people to do. Most people are like, I'm as valuable as you say that I am. Yeah. And so if somebody else hurts them, it feels devastating. But then we make these rules that are like, well, I'm never going to let somebody else be close to me, instead of being like, well, I'm not going to let other people dictate how I feel about myself.
Yeah.
That would be a much better value system to walk away with. So for forgiveness, I know I'm kind of talking about this for a while, but a lot of it has to do with detaching that it's about you, and also having compassion and empathy, because I would say there are really legitimately purposefully mean people out there, but even like parents who are abusive, most of them, it's because they're trapped in PTSD.
Yeah.
And that's not me saying it's okay. Like, go deal with that. It's not okay.
Absolutely. There's ownership that has to be taken, and it's not a get out of jail free card.
But it's not ever about the kid.
Yeah. It wasn't that the kid was actually bad and unlovable and all that stuff. And I know that when you're talking about empathy and stuff like that, I remember back when my grandfather was alive and he was losing it and acting out. One of my friends was with me around him and seeing it. And I was so like ready to have a fight with him. And my friend was like, he's just a giant kid who's really scared.
Yeah.
And he spent his whole life being scared. This isn't about you. And this isn't about him trying to be mean to you. This is about him trying to survive. I'm like, you're right.
You are right.
I forgive you, Grandpa, for not knowing how to process your pain or not choosing to running and hiding and letting fear drive your life. And this isn't about me. And the minute I did that, it's like you sidestep somebody's like judo chop.
Yeah, totally.
And you're like, oh, okay, go ahead, keep chopping away. It's not actually hitting me.
Yeah.
Because I've taken myself out of the equation.
And I think one thing that I will just say is in overcoming the blockage of unforgiveness, because it really it brings self-hatred. It keeps you end up finding people just like that. Because what happens with unforgiveness is then your soul is trying to work out the pain it's still carrying.
Oh,
and so
yeah.
It
So
finds situation after situation after situation.
It's like repeat. The classic daddy wound, like, because I haven't forgiven and my dad or whatever. Yeah. If someone's done that, and then a woman goes and tries to find a man that's exactly like her dad.
Yes.
And
or so friendships or employee, like job scenarios.
The faster you can forgive is the people in your life, is the faster you can get connected to the relationships you actually want.
Yeah. And that's the goal, is that you can forgive. You don't have to, that doesn't mean you have to be in relationship with them, but it means that then you keep your heart open to other things, other people, so you can actually have relationships that are fulfilling.
So let's talk about, I will add to this, unforgiveness towards others and towards self. Self is a big one. And especially as we're going into 2020, there are some of you, in order to get connected to people around you, you haven't even connected to yourself.
Yeah.
Or you've been trying to, and you're like, I don't understand why I can't get connected to myself. It's because you're harboring unforgiveness towards yourself. There is a giant list of your history where you're like, I can't believe I did that, and I failed here, and I can't believe 2019 I ended up in a divorce. I didn't
figure out this, and my finances weren't as good as I thought they would be, and I messed up with all of these relationships.
Yep. So you're going to have to begin that process of reviewing your own life personally and go, what do I need to forgive myself for in order to move forward in 2020?
Yeah. And I would say that kind of the same thing I just said about unforgiveness, which is you need some empathy towards yourself to let go of unforgiveness towards yourself. So like maybe you got into a fight with your boss and then you got fired and then you went bankrupt.
Wow. What a slippery slope.
What a slippery slope 19 was for you. But so empathy would be like, okay, well, what was it that made me get into a fight? Oh, this was a reaction. I like, Shia LaBeouf just came out with a movie called Honey Boy. Yeah. Which he got into.
Man, he was so good at acting in that.
He was really good in that. But it's a painful movie, just to prepare people.
Yeah. It's a heavy film. He plays the role of his own dad inside of it.
Yes.
And it's his dad relating to him. So he, as an actor, is actually acting towards himself.
Oh, yeah.
As the little boy. And we're watching the abusive history.
Yeah. And here's what the reason I brought this up is because Shia got in trouble with the police for going after policemen. He was harassed. They were trying to arrest him, and then he got really aggressive with them, and he'd done that multiple times. And so the court ordered that he go into counseling, which I love. And in that program, they were like, you have PTSD.
Yeah.
You are responding out of PTSD. And what I loved was without understanding why you do what you do, You're just like, I'm always aggressive towards authority figures, and I can't get it together, and I try so hard. And, like you can get really aggressive towards yourself because of that phrase. It's in the Bible. I do what I don't want to do. Mm-hmm. Well, often that's because there is a reason. Yeah. And so then he went into counseling, and they made him write out all of his life with his dad. And he realized he had a lot of PTSD from his relationship with his dad that was very heavy and abusive.
Yeah.
And so when he's reacting to the cops, he's actually reacting to his dad. Like that's really what's happening.
Yeah.
All of his defensive. And so
that movie made me want to go hug him.
I know.
It really did.
That movie was interesting because
I love you. I'm sorry for what you've been through.
It was such a real portrayal of what childhood can be like.
I hope he gets an award for it.
Yeah. Anyway, the goal would be actually figuring out why, whatever the mistakes you made or wherever you feel stuck, actually figuring out what is the pain that was driving that? Mm-hmm. What is the fear that was driving that? What was the protective coping mechanism that was driving that, and why did you need that as a kid or as an adult? And then once you can have compassion, how can you step forward?
Well, on that note, I want to talk about fear, because fear is a massive barrier to connection. Like you said,
that is true.
Fear is a driving force inside of our lives that ends up keeping us from looking at stuff. Even the idea that I don't want to forgive is rooted oftentimes in fear. The fear of more pain being inflicted. If I forgive this person, they'll get close to me. If I forgive myself, I'll continue to do this terrible behavior or this destructive stuff. So I'm really scared of this. And so whether it's fear of more pain, sometimes it's fear of honesty. Mm-hmm. If I get honest, like for Shia, he didn't want to get honest with his past. When you kind of see his journey inside the therapist office, he's really having to go, that there's something about it that like, do I really want to acknowledge this wasn't good? I didn't have a good dad.
Oh yeah. There's a line in it that he says, you want me to let go of the one thing that my dad gave me, which is pain. Uh-huh. Is that what he said?
Yeah. Something like that. The one thing that my dad gave me that basically fuels my job or everything that I do. You want me to let go of that one thing. And
that's fear.
Yeah, total fear was driving it. And so I think that there's, again, fear of pain. I think there's the fear of honesty.
Fear of connection.
Yeah.
Like so many people have vows, I'll never let somebody else hurt me like this. I'll never let somebody close enough to affect me like this. I'll never. And the more you push people away because of fear, the less fulfilled you get to feel.
Yeah, totally. I think there's a major fear of asking questions. Like we don't want to ask questions of how did I get here in life? Why am I here? We don't want to ask the question of how is this person feeling in this relationship, because we're terrified that they might say it not good.
Right.
We're terrified of asking for feedback.
Yeah. Because
of the shame that we have, that we carry, that we choose to carry inside of our hearts. And so even in that fear of question asking, there's this limitation, because all of a sudden we can't grow, we can't expand, because we can't get necessary understanding for the freedom that we're actually desiring.
Yeah.
And so I want to go back to fear of honesty.
Okay.
As a second, because I think that fear...
I've got some honest things to tell you about.
Well, I think that a lot of relationships don't grow, they don't bond, they don't go deep because we won't be honest. I know that going back to part of my history is I decided that I was going to get honest with every person in my life.
Oh.
And that led to beautiful
I love it.
disasters.
I love it.
That led to people feeling shame, feeling uncomfortable, getting angry, getting frustrated. That led to people not wanting to do connection with me anymore.
It also led to some of the most fulfilling, rich relationships you've ever had. It also led to reconciliation.
Some of the most miraculous reconciliation I've ever had.
Yeah. I would say you have more full circles in relationships than anyone I've ever met, but it's because you have lived with radical honesty. So there is an invitation for reconciliation to happen.
Yep. And intimacy. With that reconciliation is the intimacy.
You don't have intimacy, not real intimacy, not deep intimacy, when you're not being honest with each other.
I had a friend at one time back in the past who would never get honest with himself, ever. And he wouldn't get honest with anyone else. I mean, he literally lived a lifestyle of, oh no, I'm great, everything's okay. And so what ended up happening is no one ever really knew him.
Yeah.
And not being able to know him, he didn't actually feel bonded or connected to other people around him truly. And so when the rubber hit the road, when real problems entered into any of his relationships, there were massive fallouts.
Yeah.
Because he had gone so long not being honest. And then I'd watch him, he would demonize everyone. Oh, they're just horrible people. And all of a sudden he had these major accounts he brought to the table of how bad they were and the wrongdoings that they did to him. And no one was ever aware of it because he buried it so deep down inside of himself, and he wasn't honest from moment to moment with his pain.
Yep.
And now it was a volcano that came out, and now everyone was a villain.
Yeah.
So that is such a terrible disconnection point inside of any relationship, is to lack honesty. And to me, a lack of honesty, how do I put this? I almost feel like I want to say it's a lack of integrity, but I don't know if we can call that integrity. I don't know that it's purposeful. I think when it's fear-based, I don't know if it's like, I'm just trying to get away with something. It's just, I'm scared.
Yeah.
So I think it has pure intent, but it still is destructive.
Yeah. So we've talked about some of the barriers.
Right.
Let's talk about giving them some practical ideas of how to engage connection this year.
Yeah. Do you want to go?
Well, I thought you should start with telling a story about, because we're just talking about honesty.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you have done is you will call up people in your life from the past and have conversations with them. If there's things that you realize you need to clean up or whatever, you will, maybe it's like, I remember when you were really sick, there was some people that like emailed you and you had to like 2 years after it, like clean up a mess from not being able to respond in emails, but you were willing to do that.
Yeah, totally.
And it's almost like the sowing and reaping. The more you're willing to actually engage in honesty with people, the more you reap that as well.
Yeah. Well, so, what if everyone decided to start off 2020 with calling old friends and family members from the past and buried hatchets?
Yeah. I love it.
Or attempted to build some bridges.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't unto, we're going to be besties, but we're going to go forward.
We're going to talk over this thing.
Yeah. So for me, I've had multiple conversations with my grandma.
Yeah.
And we had a really broken relationship, and I don't think we don't have a relationship now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and act like I do have one with her. But I definitely had gotten really honest with her the same way I got honest with my grandpa.
Yeah.
I don't know that she was quite sure how to handle that initially, but she definitely apologized finally after multiple exchanges and said, I'm really sorry for a lot of that. And she definitely shed some tears. Since then, though, however, I haven't felt it necessary to do any phone calls or connection points with her. Not that
because you just don't have a lot of.
I just don't have a lot of relationship. I don't have bitterness, resentment. I don't have anger towards her. It's just kind of like, all right, well, that got dealt with. We never had a lot of relationship going into it,
but I feel good.
Got honest about it. We can move forward. She's still alive. Whatever. Let her do her life. I'll do mine.
Yeah.
But even recently, I felt like this unction inside of me, just prior to Christmas, where I was like, I just feel like I need to give her a phone call. I didn't feel some sort of guilt trip inside of me or shame that like, you haven't called your grandma since that last one. She hasn't called me.
Right.
It's like, it's a two-way street.
Totally.
That's funny too. I know a lot of grandparents will be like, you never call. It's like, when's the last time you picked up a phone and called me? Like,
it's so true.
But so I picked up the phone, gave her a call, and happened to catch her at a right time. And, it turned into a conversation where she was, very vulnerable. She cried. She said, this is the best Christmas present ever. She definitely expressed, I thought you just written me off. I'm like,
aww.
Okay, well, I don't know what to tell you. But she began to have a conversation where I was just doing casual connection.
Yeah.
And then she said, she went further into the pain from the past, and she was like, I must have really hurt you. There must have been a lot of pain that you were carrying even when you came and stayed with us when you and Abby first got married. And this was interesting.
Wild. She was empathizing.
She was empathizing.
Putting herself in your shoes and thinking what it must have been like.
And she was beginning to actively do that conversation where I'm like, what is happening right now? This is so interesting.
Yeah.
And, I began to tell her, and she asked me, why didn't you? Why didn't you tell me? And I began to say,
and here's what I love. You were not shaming because you didn't have bitterness or anger, but you weren't trying to protect her either.
Nope.
And most people don't know how to do it. So lots of people will be like, oh, it's fine. It doesn't matter. But like they want peace at all costs. Yep. But you actually have peace in your relationships, but without compromising real connection.
Yeah. And real honesty. So when she asked me, why didn't you tell me back then? I laid out, I go, well, hey, I'm not trying to dig up the past, not attacking you. Yeah. You're asking me. Here's clearly what happened. Here's what you told me through my entire childhood. That was very clearly your feelings don't matter. And so you set a precedence for why it wouldn't matter if I tried to talk to you at that point.
Right.
And she sat there and she goes, I understand that.
Which is amazing.
Which is shocking, right?
Yeah.
And she was like, that makes complete sense. Okay. I did do that and I'm really sorry. And it's amazing. The reason I think that this is probably a great one for you to ask me on, I wasn't even really necessarily trying to bury a hatchet of anything, but that was a relationship that wasn't one that I ideally would want, but I felt something inside of me tug at me. Yeah.
We call it the divine spark.
Yeah.
Like a divine intuition that all of a sudden somebody gets put on your mind or gets put on your heart. And this is one of the things that if I could get everybody in the world to do this, when you feel that, I'm not talking about ex-boyfriends that you all of a sudden feel divinely sparked to call because you actually are just feeling like
lonely and you want to get close.
Totally. I'm not talking about that kind of thing. I'm talking about like, a friend who you haven't talked to in 10 years crosses your mind. I'm going to call them and actually just say, hey.
Just so you know, I don't know if I told you this. No, I didn't tell you this. I had a dream the other night about a girl from high school that I hadn't thought about in years. I haven't talked to her since graduation, I don't think.
Wow. And you old. So that was a long time ago.
Yeah. And you old.
You old.
Well, this is funny that you said this. Like, I didn't even plan on sharing this. But I had a dream where basically I saw that she had been in pain. And there was unresolved pain, and it felt like it was recent and stuff. So I literally got on Messenger. I wasn't even friends with her on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I just sent her a message and was like, I'm sorry for your childhood. I acknowledged stuff that I did know about. And I'm like, I'm really sorry. You were really precious. I'm sorry you went through these things. And then I said, hey, here's, if you're going through stuff now, here's possibly what this dream points out. I don't know.
Yeah.
And whatever. And she responded super well. And she's like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And I think that it's like these things where we begin to, I could have logicked it. This is my point of where I'm going.
Absolutely.
I could have logicked it and been like, that's weird. Why would I need to do that? The dream probably meant nothing. I could have also gotten scared and been like, what if she thinks I'm being weird? I could have gotten all into headspace. And a lot of times we will get these unctions that our heart is crying out, do this, take this step.
Totally.
But it's those fears and maybe past situations or whatever that keep us from doing it. And then we miss out on something that's really unique and special.
Yeah.
And like you said, I have so many full circle moments where when I've followed that, it's led into beautiful relational opportunities.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've seen this happen over and over again. We could do like an entire podcast on how many times you felt sparked to connect to somebody that you hadn't talked to in years or check in on somebody.
Or ask for forgiveness randomly and be like, hey, I remember I went through a season, this is the last thing I'll say. I went through a season where...
These are good stories. Tell us.
I don't feel like everyone has to do what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
Okay. But there was a time where I felt like I needed to go apologize to all the girls that I had had sexual encounters with.
Yeah.
That I had the capacity to had a phone number for or could contact in some way, shape or form. I didn't feel shame about it. I didn't feel guilt. I just felt like there was an invitation.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to risk sounding weird. I made phone calls to some women were like, why would you apologize for that?
Totally.
I totally enjoyed that. And I was into that whole thing. And I was like, that's fine. Just so you know, you're worth more than your body.
Totally.
And you may not get this,
Right.
but you need to hear this, at least from me.
Yeah.
Other girls broke down crying.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh my God, I've never had any guy like say that I meant more than that and apologize like that. I don't even know what to do with this. So I didn't care if I sounded weird.
Yeah.
I didn't care if they received it, didn't receive it. I just participated in it. And that's part of getting connection in this year, is moving on those unctions.
Now, the thing that you did is you didn't have expectation on what the conversation had to be. You weren't trying to become best friends with them. You weren't trying to have full circle moments. You weren't trying to like concoct some great thing in all of them, with your grandma, with all
I was
these
just
people.
being present with the moment.
You were just being present, and you were following your intuition.
And I think that, you know, we're kind of like veering off of just calling old friends and burying hatchets into being present. Part of getting connected in the new year is just learning how to be really present.
Yeah, so you can recognize in yourself when you're feeling sparked divinely, when you're actually feeling intuition, when you're actually being reminded of a relationship thing. And I think there's sometimes where things have just gone on for a long time. Like, I just haven't talked to this person for a long time and I don't even remember why, or there's just this awkwardness between us and I don't want to break the ice and it could be weird. And that's going back to fear being one of the things that keeps us disconnected. I think you've had one of the most radical full circle lives because you've been fearless. Like, you've chosen every time there was fear to push into it, to be courageous, to choose to like actually go forward in things.
Totally.
You know, like, I know this one more story. Will you tell the story with your youth pastor growing up?
All right. So I had this youth pastor growing up and he was just a total ass. I mean, there's no other way to put it. He was an ass on how he approached all of us. He was like riding us for anything that we did that was seemingly wrong. And we were like, I was best friends with the pastor's son who was getting into terrible shit all the time. But I was actually like just being a basic kid for the most part. I wasn't doing any major destructive things. But so anyway, so he's hyper religious and he's always on our backs. And at some point I did everything I could to finally break him. I purposely did things to annoy him. When I found out that he was leaving for a new job, I did everything I could to snap him. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but I was totally over it. So years go by. I'm now a youth leader at a church with some kids, and like it was
hard,
taxing as I was dealing with kids who were way worse than I was.
Right. Totally.
Right. But I was way better than this former youth leader as far as like giving them grace and like
You're
whatever.
Very kind and loving. And
but
engaging.
I still felt very tortured by the situation. And so I decided to pick up the phone. I got his phone number from somebody and I gave him a call and I said,
which
hey,
also, by the way, is another part of connection, is being intentional enough to, instead of being like, well, I don't have their number. Oh, well, like actually being like, no, I'm going to put energy towards doing this and not just be lazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I go all out of my way to get a hold of him. And when I'm on the phone with this guy, I'm like, dude, I just want to say I'm now a youth leader. I'm sorry for any of the hell that I put you through. Here's some of the stuff that's gone on with me. And he's laughing, right? He's like, look, man, first off, I forgive you. All right. Second off, I was a jerk. I was terrible in the way that I treated you guys. And he said, I went from that job to working with like, what do they call it? Actual juvenile delinquents in a juvenile delinquent center. And he was like, you guys were like Mother Teresa in comparison to anything that I've been through over here. And so it led to a lot of mutual respect.
And laughs, I'm sure.
Laughs. Mm-hmm. Yes, we laughed our asses off together.
Oh, totally.
He had completely changed. I had completely changed. And that's something oftentimes we find out is that we've been harboring things for years that have kept us from being connected to people. When we return, we're not even talking to the same person anymore. And we have looked back through our years and time has chiseled away at each of our souls. And we're going, oh, we both get a little bit more than we did before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Every time that I've had relationship issues, we can like have a conversation about it 2 years later and it's good. And then 4 years later, we have so much more revelation and understanding of how things were happening. And then 10 years later and you're like, oh, we were different people. And it's just time gives you a lot of perspective.
Absolutely.
So we just want to encourage you to this year to have it your goal, like when something pops up in your head where you could pursue connection, where you could pursue, and I mean, calling somebody and apologizing, or just calling somebody and being like, I haven't heard from you in a long time, wanted to see how you are, wanted to let you know I'm thinking about you. Those things are so beautiful and so powerful. I can't tell you how many times me or Justin have randomly thought of someone, called them that day, and it's been like, oh, this is exactly what I needed. And so being connected to yourself enough to be aware of that.
I want to say this. One of the things that I remembered that we didn't go over with barriers to connection was denial and avoidance. And I'm not going to go deep into that but it does play a role in something I want to talk about here. A lot of times we're living in such denial about how our relationships really are, where we're at inside of our heart. Yeah. We're avoiding doing that stuff. Also very much rooted in fear.
Totally.
But when we're not doing that, we're not able to accept where we're at in life.
Yeah.
Because if I'm living in denial and avoidance, then I can't just say, hey, this is my life. I have a friend recently who had said, you know what? I had to accept that I'm 40. I am single. And there's not any current prospects for that. And I've been trying to ignore the reality of that existence. And I've hated myself for it.
Yep.
Under the surface. And I just want to accept that this is where I am. And if I don't ever get married, that's fine too. I am here right now. And it doesn't mean that I'm bad for being here. And by accepting, I can kind of ask myself the question, how'd I get here?
Totally.
Because a lot of people are at a place in their life because they haven't gotten honest with where they're at and gotten at peace with where they're currently at.
Yeah.
I think to me, it takes a foundation of like, all right, I'm at peace with the fact that I'm this age and I'm not married, if we're using that subject.
Yeah.
But I would like to change it. What are some of the things that I could do to change it? When we ask with purity of heart instead of shaming aggression, it's an entire different approach.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we get stuck when we are in shame. And so much of that has to do with judgment. I know I have several clients that they have beliefs that being single mean you're inherently unworthy. And I'm like, I know a million people who are married that wishes they were single. I'm like, no.
It's so true.
No. It's singleness and marriage. Neither of those mark if you have more or less worth. And I think it's so easy for us to, whatever the thing is that
whether
we
it's
think
finances, having
career,
kids, not having kids.
Yes. We always put that as the standard. So, I mean, for me this year, I had to do a lot of, okay, I'm 35 and I don't have kids. That's not what I saw my life being. That's not where I imagined. Like, I didn't imagine I would be sick so long that I wouldn't have kids when I was almost, halfway to 40.
Yeah.
That's not what I saw. But if I don't get to acceptance about that, then then I have to disconnect from people. Then I'd have to disconnect from my friends who are having kids.
Right. You couldn't be around them ever. That's interesting when you bring up the kids thing, because I do actually know people who don't have kids who can't be around people with kids.
Yeah.
Because they feel so much pain about that.
And listen, there's not judgment. I don't want them to feel condemned if they're not there yet, because anger is a part of the grief process. You just can't stay there.
Sure. But the point is it really builds a barrier. So they can't just go, oh, I don't have kids, but I'm going to go be with these friends who do have kids. I'm going to enjoy their kids.
Yeah.
And whether it's kids, money, opportunities, Why can't I just be friends with the people that do have what I don't have and enjoy the overflow of their life and their success and count that as part of one of my blessings until maybe I one day do have it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I just want to make sure that, because any of these things we're talking about can be very painful if you don't have something that you really want. If you don't have a spouse and you really want them, if you don't have kids and you really want them, if you don't have the career and you really want it. And so we have so much compassion for that. There's so much compassion we have for being in a life circumstance that isn't what you had imagined.
Right now, what Abby is doing is she's patting all of you people. She's like the mom that's putting on the pads and she's making sure that you know.
Well, because I know.
It's all okay.
No, it's true though. People need to know. And there is a grief process. I had to have times when I was angry that my friends could have kids. I had to have times that I was angry at a baby shower thing or whatever. I just don't want to stay there. I didn't stay there because I want connection. And so I got to a place of I grieved what wasn't so I could accept what is. And so now I accept like this is. And if another wave comes up, I'm okay with that. But I'm not allowing that pain to divide me and separate me.
Totally. Transitioning to another one, I think a really powerful thing in this season to connect is to ask for feedback on how you communicate.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tie this with another one that we have, which is doing DTRs with people. The
DTR is created, the concept of a DTR is define the relationship, came about by Danny Silk.
Yeah.
I just want to give him credit for that.
Yeah.
It was just his language.
So here's the thing. On a regular basis, I do check-ins with all my people, my friends, my employees, my spouse. Like, hey, how do you think our relationship is going?
When's the last time you did that with me? You haven't sat down anytime recently and said, how am I sucking at life?
Justin.
Tell me how this is going. I'm just being playful. Yeah. I bet for a second there people's anxiety went up. Wait, is he confronting her?
For a second, my anxiety went up. I was
I saw your face. Is he confronting me?
I was like, I think I do this regularly. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you think our relationship is going? Is your love tank feeling filled? Is my love tank feeling filled? Like, let's just check in.
How are we communicating? How are we connecting? Is there things that we're not talking about that need to be talked about? And that can go from friends, kids, spouses, romantic partners, all of it. I think one of our friends recently sat down with their kids and had one of these conversations.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Give us feedback. What's going on?
One of my best friends, she has 2 kids, and one is a boy and one is a girl, and they're several years separated.
Yeah.
And so probably once a year or so, they sit down and facilitate a conversation. How do you guys feel like your friendship is going? What is it that you are loving about it? What is it that you wish more you could have? So like in this one, the girl was like, I wish you would help me with Minecraft more. The boy was like, I'm fine. Like he had nothing else he needed.
I don't even care about you. I just want to be a teenager. Go have fun.
But they facilitated a conversation where they both got heard and they both felt loved. And then they started interacting different from that.
Yeah.
They started engaging each other. And so I think that just check-ins, because typically you can have little tweaks and sometimes just somebody feeling heard changes the game.
Mm-hmm. I think with that, going back to my ask for feedback on how you communicate, the reason I specifically singled out this specific type of feedback is because
you want to ask me about how you communicate.
We got to have a conversation about your communication style, Abby. There's communication is the number one bridge or barrier to relational connection.
True.
Because oftentimes people are having complete meltdowns over misunderstandings because of the way that they're communicating.
Yep.
And a lot of times I know that for me, I can be like, I'm in a happy mood and I'm great and I'm trying to share something with you. And you're like, why are you so angry? Why are you being so intense? And I'm like, I don't understand.
I'm not intense.
And so a lot of times in the past, there's been places where you've said, hey, I feel like you misrepresent yourself in the way that you communicate, not only to me, but to other people. Mm-hmm. I found recently I was with a friend. He's an 8 as well on the Enneagram.
What?
And we were having a conversation. I wish I could tell the whole story of this. This is hysterical. He's older than me, but we were leaving a situation that was with a group of people, and we were talking about our communication style and stuff like that. And he was like, oh my God, I tell my wife, I tell my friends, all the time, like, I verbally process the things that I'm going to do to people, but I would never do, because when it comes down to it, I'm actually going to do and say stuff with grace and kindness,
right,
but I just need to vent, and nobody understands me in this environment.
Yes.
And so everyone's perpetually misunderstanding him inside of that space because of the way he communicates, and also because they haven't accepted, like, oh, this is how he communicates.
Right.
Let's ask him, like, is this you just, and that's what you've learned to do, Justin. Is
this you verbally processing, or is this actually how you're going to handle the situation? Because this will be Justin. I'm going to go up to that guy, I'm going to throttle him, and I'm going to tell him, what is your problem? You little piece of crap. Like, that might be something that you would, like, verbally process. And then the real conversation would be like, hey, so I'm feeling like you came after and attacked my wife, and I want to understand what's happening, and I want to communicate some boundaries so that we can navigate that. Like, the way you actually handle situations all the time is so much nicer.
So Abby lived terrified of the things that I might do.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like, I have the capacity to do them. It's not that I'm scared to do them. It's that I have the wherewithal and the wisdom
not to.
And the love in my heart to go, all right, what's going to get me the furthest with this person?
Right.
Get heard. But I have to
Probably
get over the hurdle.
Probably not throttling them.
So I think that that's a huge thing. Going like at the beginning of this year to some of your core relationships and say, hey, how do you experience me when I communicate? Is there stuff in the way that I communicate that shuts you down or creates division in this relationship or causes you to not want to be honest with me?
Are there areas that you think that I communicate where I misrepresent myself?
Yeah. Can you imagine that if my grandma had come to me when I was a kid? Imagine if you had an emotionally intelligent grandparent.
Oh my gosh.
Who came up to a kid and said, hey, kiddo, are there ways that I've communicated or talked to you
that have hurt you,
that cause you to shut down and you don't want to share with me?
Yeah.
And if I had been like, you always tell me that my life's not a big problem and just get over it. Like, if I had had that space, what could that have done inside of our relationship?
Oh, totally. And this is a thing where people, because they don't live intentionally, can spend years where they think they're loving someone really well, and the other person feels frustrated the whole time, and they never know because they just don't have conversations about it.
Yeah. So I think we kind of touched on this before about the fear of honesty, and we kind of like covered this even in getting out of denial and avoidance, but really getting honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Getting honest about what you want. The honesty thing, we're gonna just kind of tie this back in as we kind of wrap this up. But what do I want out of life? Where am I disappointed in life? What do I really need to grieve? What haven't I celebrated that I need to go celebrate, because that's actually causing hopelessness that I haven't celebrated all these good things? What are my relationships really currently like? What is my job really like? What do I really want out of my job and out of my relationships? Like, getting honest. It's terrifying to get honest because we're not only scared of the mess that's actually possibly in front of us, but we're actually scared of the actions that we may now have to take that feel bigger than us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and getting honest with yourself feels like also accepting what is. Like, no, okay, this is actually where I'm at in life. And this is part of, I'm going to own my story. I think so much of healing for me has happened in just owning what is true.
Yeah.
Whether it's good or bad, like, this is true. I have used these coping mechanisms to protect myself, and I have had pain because of this. And even I feel so relieved when I get honest with myself about things. Like, you've confronted me before on ways that I communicate. I have this trigger where when I get really confused, I sound so condescending.
Oh, you come across as a complete ass.
Yeah. I come across so intense.
You'll be like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
What? No.
What would you ever be thinking that would make that make sense?
What would cause you to do that? How is that even? And I'm like, oh my gosh.
I know. It's so true. But for me, so in denying that, like, no, I don't do that. that doesn't help me, and it doesn't help you, and it doesn't help connection.
It keeps barriers.
Yeah. So when I finally recognized, and to be honest, I didn't recognize this just from you. It took feedback from several people, which is why we're saying get feedback from people because it's very helpful. So I got feedback from several people and recognized, okay, this is like a real thing. I come off really intense, but it's because I'm stuck in my own head. I'm in a loop in my own head it's like trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and I'm trying really hard, and all my energy is trying to do that, and none of my energy is using people skills anymore.
No,
so
totally.
I'm not. So
it's what you call as baffled.
Yeah, I call it my baffled thing. And so now I can recognize so now I'm just honest. Like I have a bad baffled reaction. We were having dinner with friends the other day. They were talking about a subject that I could not wrap my brain around. Like the culture of the community they were talking about made no sense to me. And so Justin taps me. He's like, you're baffled. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then I softened and really communicated. Like I'm not being condescending. I'm just trying to wrap my brain around
Yeah, because you looked offended and
judgmental.
And judgmental about it.
Yeah,
it
and
was
I
so funny.
wasn't.
And you're literally verbally processing.
Yeah. And for
me,
me,
I don't get why you do this.
This is, again, we talk so much about self-awareness, but when I could recognize, logic was the safest place. I grew up in a family where there's mental illness, so a lot of things felt really crazy.
Yeah.
And so logic to me is the only safe place. So if you're telling me something that I can't fit inside my logic, I feel out of control. So I desperately need to figure out how to fit it in my logic. So all of that is to say, now I can have compassion on myself when that happens. Now I can engage and interact.
Yeah.
And when in being honest with myself about that, I got more healing, and now people experience me better.
Yeah. So that's the end of this episode. We're going to wrap it up right there. Mm-hmm. And moving forward into 2020, we want to tell you guys this year, our heart is to, further take some of these things and launch you guys into a 2020 that's full of hope. Mm-hmm. We're going to actually maybe do an episode on hope and a couple other things. We have
so many good episodes planned.
We really do.
We have some great guests this year. We have some great topics. I don't think I could be more excited.
Yeah, some of our favorite people we're going to be bringing on this year. And so it should be a fun, wild year. Thank you guys for joining us.
Yeah, so I'm just going to recap.
On
ways to connect.
Yeah.
2020. Call old friends, bury hatchets, forgive yourself, forgive other people. For me, and I didn't mention this, but when I'm working on forgiveness, I just pray for love for the people I want to forgive.
Yeah.
That they would encounter love, that they would experience love, that they would, anything that I would want to feel for me, I pray for them. Accept where you are in life, acknowledge it, be honest about it, like yourself in the midst of it. Choose that's okay that this is where I'm at. Now I can figure out how to love my life from this place. Now I can figure out what to do to make it. Be honest about your dreams. This is where I'm at, but this is where I want to go.
Yeah.
Ask for feedback on how you communicate, and have check-in relationships with your friends, your kids, your spouses, your romantic relationships.
Totally. So thanks for joining us. Happy New Year's, everyone.
Go team.
Go team.